My name is Brianna Cole. I am 27 years old. At my husband's company gala, 700 guests, black tie, downtown Manhattan, his business partner took the microphone and told the entire room that I was a gold digger, that I had seduced my husband for his money, that I had no education, no class, and no place at that table. My husband stood up and said, "She's right," in front of 700 people. Then Sandra looked at the security guard near the door and said 2 words, "Remove her." And my husband said nothing. I was walked out of that ballroom like a stranger, in front of 700 people. I stood in that hallway alone, and I made one phone call. And when the person on the other end of that call walked through those doors, every single person in that room stopped breathing, including my husband, including Sandra, including every investor who had just watched them destroy me. But before I tell you what happened, take a moment to like and subscribe, and tell me your country in the comments. Now let's go back to the beginning. The ballroom was on the 34th floor of one of the most expensive hotels in Manhattan, floor-to-ceiling windows, the entire New York skyline behind us, white orchids on every table, crystal glasses, candlelight, the kind of room that makes you feel, just by standing in it, that everything in your life has finally arrived. I spent 3 hours getting ready that night, not because I was nervous, but because I knew exactly what this night was. I wore black, simple, floor length, nothing excessive. I looked at myself in the mirror before we left, and I thought, yes, this is enough. I should have trusted that feeling more than I trusted the people in that room. I met Marcus Webb 18 months before that night. Austin, Texas, a rooftop event. Quick handshake, 5-minute conversation, nothing that announced itself as important. But he called 3 days later, and something about the way he talked, no performance, no ego, just real, made me stay on the phone for 2 hours. Marcus had built his company from nothing, 10 years of failing and rebuilding. By the time I met him, Webb Capital was solid, respected, profitable. He was proud of it the quiet way people are proud of things they actually built with their own hands. I liked that about him. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. My mother was a high school math teacher. My father left when I was 9. Everything I had built myself, scholarship by scholarship, step by step. But there was one thing I had never told Marcus. My uncle, Walter Cole, had spent 40 years building one of the largest black-owned investment firms in America, Cole Merritt Financial Group. Billions in assets, offices in 4 cities, a name that made people in every financial room in this country sit up straighter, and I was the only family he had. When Marcus and I got serious, I made a deliberate choice. I did not mention Uncle Walter, not because I was hiding something shameful, but because I had watched my entire life how a name changes the way people see you, how a connection rewrites your story before you have had a chance to tell it yourself. I wanted Marcus to choose Brianna from Atlanta, the analyst, the woman who stayed on the phone for 2 hours talking about nothing important and everything real. He chose her. He proposed on a rainy Thursday night. No cameras, no audience, just us. I said yes before he finished asking. But Marcus came with partners. 2 of them. Derek Shaw and Sandra Reeves. Sandra had been there from the beginning. Early investor, early believer, and she had her own vision for Marcus's life. The moment I met her, I understood. The way she looked at me, not with open hostility, but with something careful and measuring that never fully relaxed. She had imagined a different future for Marcus, and I was not part of that future. So she started working, quietly, consistently, little comments to Marcus behind closed doors. Does she really understand what you have built? Are you sure about her? She is not who you think she is. Month after month, seed after seed. And Marcus, who was strong in so many ways, had one weakness. He trusted the people who had been there from the beginning more than he trusted his own heart. I saw the shift happening, the questions that felt like tests, the silences that lasted too long. I brought it up twice, directly, clearly, Both times he told me I was imagining it. I stopped bringing it up, and I started managing it alone. The gala was the company's annual event. Marcus had been excited for weeks. The company had just closed its biggest deal to date, and he wanted to celebrate properly. He wanted me there beside him. He said that specifically. "I want you there beside me, Bree." I believed him. The first 2 hours were fine. I moved through that room with Marcus, met investors, clients, partners, had real conversations about markets, portfolios, strategy. More than once, I watched someone's expression shift mid-conversation when they realized I was not just decoration. Marcus squeezed my hand and leaned close. "You are incredible, you know that?" I smiled. I held on to that. At 9 o'clock, Sandra stood up. She walked to that podium like someone who had been preparing for a very long time. She thanked the investors. She talked about integrity, about trust, about protecting what you have built. And then she looked directly at me. "There are people," she said, "who recognize what a good man has built and position themselves close to it. Not because they share his vision, not because they bring something real, but because proximity to success is its own kind of strategy." 700 people turned to look at me. I looked at Marcus. He was looking at the table. Sandra continued, "She is not who she has presented herself to be, and Marcus deserves better than someone who saw his success and made a calculated decision." I turned to Marcus again. This time he looked up, and I waited, because after 18 months, after everything, I had earned the right to need him to stand up. He stood up. My heart lifted for exactly 1 second. "Sandra is right," he said. "I have had my own doubts." 700 people heard it. The room erupted in whispers, and then Sandra looked toward the door. She raised one hand slightly toward the security guard. 2 words. "Quiet, calm, remove her." And Marcus said nothing. A hand touched my arm, firm, steady. "Ma'am?" I looked down at that hand. Then I looked up at 700 faces watching me get walked out like I had never belonged there, like I was nobody. I did not cry. I did not pull away. I walked with my head straight through that entire ballroom, past every single table, past every single face, and through those doors, into the hallway, alone. I stood in that corridor on the 34th floor of a Manhattan hotel, and I breathed. Then I took out my phone. My hands were not shaking. I dialed. Uncle Walter answered before the second ring finished. "Bree." Just my name, but in his voice was everything. "I need you," I said. 3 words. "Where are you?" I told him. 20 minutes, he said. I hung up. I straightened my dress, and I walked back in. I sat back down at my table in front of 700 people who had just watched me get removed. Marcus stared at me like he could not process what he was seeing. I did not look at him. I picked up my water glass, and I waited. 17 minutes later, the doors opened. I did not turn around. I just watched the faces at the tables near the entrance, and I saw the exact moment it happened. The recognition, the confusion, the recalculation. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to mouths. Someone near the back actually stood up before catching themselves. Then I heard Sandra, who had been speaking again, stop. Mid-sentence, complete stop. I turned around. Uncle Walter walked the way he always walked, unhurried, unannounced, completely certain. The kind of man who has never, once in 40 years, needed to make an entrance because his presence already was one. He crossed that room directly to me, put one hand on my shoulder, and looked at me the way he had looked at me since I was 12 years old. I am here. It is handled. Then he straightened and looked at Marcus. Marcus had gone completely still. "You are," Marcus whispered. "Walter Cole," my uncle said. That name moved through that room like electricity. Walter Cole, Cole Merritt Financial. Derek Shaw stood up from his chair involuntarily. 2 investors were already on their phones. Someone near the back said the name out loud, and it rippled all the way to the front of the room. Sandra had not moved from the podium. All that smooth confidence, all that careful preparation, every single thing she had spent months building, gone, replaced by something small and unguarded and afraid. Marcus looked between us. "She is he started. "My niece," Walter said, "since she was born." "She never told me," Marcus said. His voice was unrecognizable. "No," my uncle said. "She asked me not to. She wanted you to choose her, not her last name, not what a phone call to me might do for your business." He looked at Marcus steadily. "You chose her, completely, and you stood up in front of 700 people and agreed with someone who called her a gold digger, and then you let them walk her out." Marcus closed his eyes. Walter turned to Sandra. "I know your firm," he said. "I know your partners. 3 people in this room tonight have been moving assets to Cole Merritt. After tonight, that number will be higher." Sandra's hands on that podium were white. She said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Walter turned back to me. "Ready?" I stood up. I looked at Marcus one last time, the man who had squeezed my hand 2 hours ago and called me incredible, the man who moved that same hand away when it mattered, the man who had watched security walk me out and said nothing. "I never needed your validation," I told him. "I only ever wanted your trust." His jaw tightened. His eyes were wet. "Bree, please." "You had 18 months, I said. 18 months of me showing you exactly who I was, and tonight you showed me exactly who you are. We are done." I picked up my clutch and I walked through that ballroom one final time. Same room, same 700 people, same Manhattan skyline behind those floor-to-ceiling windows. But this time the silence was different. Not the silence of watching someone be humiliated, the silence of 700 people sitting with what they had just witnessed. At the entrance I stopped. I did not turn around. "Sandra," I said, loud enough for every single person in that room to hear, "I want you to remember every detail of this moment, because this is the last time you will ever be in a room this important." And I walked out. I filed for divorce 23 days later. Sandra Reeves resigned from Webb Capital within a month. 3 of the investors from that night moved their assets to Cole Merritt. Derek called me personally to apologize. He was the only one who did. Marcus sent messages for weeks. Long ones, detailed ones, the kind that show someone finally thinking about things they should have thought about 18 months earlier. I read every single one. And then I put the phone down and went back to my life. Uncle Walter never said, "I told you so." He did not have to. Some people will say I should have told Marcus the truth from the beginning. Maybe they are right. But here's what I know. I did not hide who I was to deceive him. I hid it to find the one thing I had spent my whole life searching for. The feeling of being chosen for no reason except you. He had that chance. 18 months of that chance. And when the real moment came, the one that actually mattered, he let them walk me out. And that told me everything I would ever need to know. If someone has ever chosen everything else over you, tell me in the comments below. And if you believe she finally made the right call, hit that like button and subscribe, because next week's story is even more unbelievable than this one. I will see you then.